Hi everyone, my name's Richard Smith and this here is James Vaness. We both work for School Energy Efficiency. Now, I hope you're all sitting comfortably because James is going to tell you a story all about Antarctica.
Okay, so my story begins all the way back in 2014. So, are you lucky is where we're going to start. I think I'm very lucky. There's been lots of things that have happened in my life that have been really fun and exciting, and I'm sure you can think of lots of examples too. But it's interesting that some research shows that actually everybody has good things in their life and everybody has things that don't go quite so well as well. But people who appear to be lucky are the ones that tend to look and concentrate on the good things that have happened in their life and look for opportunities rather than the ones that see the negatives and dwell on them. And we're in a situation with climate and climate change where we really need to start thinking positively. Okay, so I'm thinking we need to try and look on the positive side of what's going on and sort of almost create our own luck going forward. So, my story is about this man here, a guy called Robert Swan, who you've probably never heard of, but that will come through in the story as it becomes unraveled. So, back in 2014, as I said before, what I'm doing is I'm meeting up with this guy over another project, and I get an email back from him after I propose something that I want to do, and that involves spending some time with him and his adventures down to Antarctica. And I remember sitting very carefully on the sofa and my email popping up on my screen going and reading this. I know it's very short notice, but if you can join us, why not try? We depart on the 8th of March for Antarctica. So I had about 3 weeks to sort myself out. And with the help and support of people like the Mark Group and the Stevenson Studio School, I managed to raise some money to actually take hold of this trip. So the plan was that I was going to drive from Nottingham, where I live, down to London. I was then going to fly from there to Madrid in Spain. And from Spain, I would then fly down to Buenos Aires in Argentina, which is part of South America. And then from there, I'd take another flight that would take me down to a place called Ushuaia, the most southerly city in the world, right down at the bottom of the map there, at the bottom of South America. And the plan was then to get on a boat from Ushuaia and cross the roughest sea in the world through Drake's Passage and come over to the Antarctic Peninsula. So that's the plan. So, who's this guy? Why am I going to Antarctica? What is this all about? Well, I think it's best if I just let Robert introduce himself.
Where are we? Everybody look out of the window. We're in the most southerly city in the world. This is it. You cannot go to a city any further south than Ushuaia. Everybody here is a big dreamer. You're a big dreamer, otherwise you wouldn't be here. You wouldn't. And my dream, as you might know, is to do with the Antarctic. My dream is that the world has the sense to leave just one place alone, where we're going. Just one place. It's not much to ask. And all of us here, otherwise we wouldn't be here, want to make, and I include all of us, we want to make positive changes personally, don't we? Yeah. We want to come out better people. If you're not trying to be a better person, you shouldn't be here. So we want to be better people. Make positive changes to our world out there. Because we need to make those changes, don't we? We all know that. people very kindly introduced me as the first person in history to walk to the North and South Poles. And actually, of course, I'm proud of that, of what we did, not what I did, what we did. But you have to know that I am really more proud of standing here in front of you. 88 people, 27 nations, with some hope. And after 30 years of battling, right? 30 years of trying, this is the best way that I found of making a difference.
So, Robert Swan, the first man in history to walk to both the North and South Poles. His story is incredible. And as I say, I was lucky enough to travel down to the Antarctic Peninsula with him. And here's his story. This is why I want to share with you. So him as a small boy of around 10, 11 years of age, was at home one Christmas and was watching the film Scott of the Antarctic. Scott was one of the great explorers back in the early 1900s who was in a challenge and a race to be the first person to make it to the South Pole. It's an incredible story of hardship and trial, and incredibly, he got to the South Pole, but just shortly after somebody else who'd also beaten him there, Amundsen. And the tragedy of the story was that on his way back, they hit really, really harsh weather, and him and all of the people in his team perished on the way back. He didn't make it. But Robert watched this film and was really inspired by what had gone on and what Scott had managed to achieve, and decided that he wanted to follow in his footsteps. So you think about Antarctica, well, you see it on a map, and generally all you see is a little white line that goes across the bottom of the map. And actually, Antarctica is a continent, it's a landmass, and it's pretty big. So Robert's plan was, just like Scott had done, was to follow that red footpath just into the middle to the geographical South Pole. It doesn't look too much of a challenge, does it, really? But when you consider how big Antarctica is, significantly bigger than the United States of America, then you can see that that's actually a pretty big challenge. That's just under 900 miles on foot, unassisted, with no help and support, with an average temperature of around minus 30 degrees, which is a little bit chilly. So how on earth was he going to do it? Well, just like Scott, he followed in his footsteps, and you can see on there Shackleton, another great explorer, Scott 1911, 1912, and then Swan 1985. He went down to Cape Evans and he built himself a little shelter and wintered over just as Scott had done. And there's Scott and there's Robert with his four-man team supporting him. And so they wintered over because they needed to get down there in the summer when the ice all melted back so they could get close enough to the land. And then they had to winter over and then wait for the good weather to come in the spring. So that was the plan. Then three of them would then make their attempt to make it to the South Pole, just following in Scott's footsteps. And this is them in 1985, setting out to try and be the first people since Scott to try and walk unassisted there. They went with no radios, nothing. There was nothing there, no support network at all. There were some people, a small American base at the South Pole itself, but they were there walking alone on the agreement that if one of them was to fall and break the leg, then the others would have to leave them there to die because there was no way of getting them out. And the others would just have to carry on. It was a really, really difficult journey. They got across the Ross Ice Shelf and then they got to the Beardsmore Glacier, a huge 250 miles uphill with horrible, horrendous crevices and ice cracks, really, really dangerous. They had real problems with the sleds and the runners, and they really struggled. And Rob didn't think he was going to make it. He really didn't think he was going to make it. But then they found the problem with the sled runners. They managed to fix that, and they managed to battle on through. And they got to the top of the Beardsmore Glacier all in one piece. So you think, well, it must be nearly there, but no, it's just another 350 miles uphill to the geographical South Pole. It was really, really tough. But like Scott, they made it. Scott looking slightly disappointed because he'd made it to the South Pole, but realized that he wasn't the first. But there's Rob. He made it, the 11th of January, 1986. But with a sad sort of tinge to it. He was super happy to have made it. But on reaching there, he found out that the boat that was coming back to pick them up had got caught in the ice, crushed, and had sunk to the bottom of the sea. They were there, stranded in Antarctica, him and the crew that had come to try and pick him up. What on earth were they going to do? Fortunately, the Americans at the base took pity on him and they flew him out. But some people had to stay over back in the hut that he'd wintered over in for another winter. And then the following year, they managed to get a boat down there to clear up all and take everything away that they'd taken with them. So there's Robert just after finishing. So what did he do? He went home to see his mum. And the first thing his mum said to him is, Robert, what have you done to your eyes? He said, what are you talking about, Mother? I've just walked to the South Pole. Haven't you been watching the news? She said, no, your eyes have changed color. And it was back then that we found a hole in what they call the ozone layer, which is part of the atmosphere. And what it does is it filters out some of the harmful rays that actually protects us. So, you know, when you go out in the sunshine, sometimes you get sunburn. But these rays were really significant. And the hole in the ozone layer was above the Antarctica at the time. So these rays have been bouncing down off the ice, back up into his face, and actually bleached some of the color out of his eyes that have gone from blue to a sort of light blue, almost gray color. So that was one of the first things, or the first thing that Rob thought, wow, what are we doing to our environment? What are we doing to the atmosphere? We're making man-made changes, which is having a significant effect on what's going on. So $1.2 million in debt back in the 1980s, and that was a lot of money back then. Rob's thinking, what on earth am I going to do now? I'm in debt. So like all good explorers, like Scott and Shackleton, when they made a loss, they just went on another adventure. So he spent the next few years planning a trip to go to the North Pole. So with his team of 8, they set off to try and make it to the North Pole. And unfortunately, as they set off, because there's no landmass under the North Pole, it's just literally ice on water. What happened was that the ice cap started to break up 3 months earlier than it ever had before. They were in serious trouble. Literally, as you can see from the picture, jumping from iceberg to iceberg. It was terrifying. And they were lucky. They were very lucky to survive. They had a change in the weather conditions and the wind changed direction and then blew some of the icebergs back together again. And of course, as they went further north, they became more solid and they survived. But it was very harrowing. So on the 14th of May, 1989, they reached the North Pole and Robert Swan became the first man to walk to both the North and South Poles. And in the footsteps of Scott, his first expedition stands as the longest unassisted walk ever made on Earth of 900 miles. So when I had the chance to see this guy and meet him, oh gosh, I was definitely wanting to be there. So that's what started off my journey. Rob, since then, has been a keynote speaker at World Sustainable Summits all across the world from 1992. And his plan was to go there and he was going to talk to these politicians and they were going to listen. And yes, everything would change. We'd start making the changes we need to make to have a cleaner environment and generate energy via clean resources like wind and sun, as opposed to burning what we call fossil fuels. And he formed his organization 2041. And that's all about 50 years after the agreement of the Antarctic Treaty, which is all about trying to look after and keep Antarctica as a sole nation and not interfere and not use it for military purposes or go there to dig up oil or gold or any other valuable things they can find there. So that was my journey, going down to the most beautiful place I've ever been in the world, completely unspoiled. So, fossil fuels. We've been burning coal and petrol and natural gas for many years now. And you can see from the graph that things have gone up since the early 1900s, when what we call the Industrial Revolution. We've been burning lots of coal and gas. And what this is doing is it's putting carbon dioxide up into the atmosphere and generating a thicker layer of what we call greenhouse gases up in the atmosphere. So the sun radiates down onto the earth, and some of it's bounced back off the atmosphere, but some of it is absorbed by the earth and then re-emitted back out. Now, the yellow layer you can see there is actually good. We need that layer, because that's what actually keeps some of the warmth in and allows us to function. Otherwise, the earth would be really, really cold and we wouldn't be able to survive. But the problem is that layer is getting thicker and thicker and thicker because of these greenhouse gases, and a lot of that is carbon dioxide. And what that means is that it's actually increasing the average temperature across the world. And that's leading to what we call climate change. And so we're getting more extreme weather conditions. So more rain, hotter weather, and it's having a significant effect on people's lives across the world. So Antarctic ice loss, I like this statistic in lots of ways. It gives us an idea of how much is melting from those from the ice caps, both at the North and the South Pole. And it's saying that Antarctic ice loss each year would make 9.8 quadrillion 1-inch ice cubes. So it's like a little ice cube that you'd have in your drink, okay? But that's the equivalent of 1,360,000 of those per person on the planet. So absolutely every single one of you, imagine having 1,360,000 ice cubes. It's incredible to just think how much that is. And that's happening year after year. And what's happening is that because of the temperature increase, that ice is falling off into the water, into the ocean. The oceans are warming up. And what actually you're getting is sea level rise as well, which is becoming a real issue for people who live in low-lying areas or around the coast of in cities around the world. So back to my trip. So the organization 2041, and it's our International Antarctic Expedition. So I'm down in Ushuaia, and there's our boat, the Sea Spirit, and we're going to cross the roughest bit of sea in the world. So there we are, from Ushuaia. We're going to go round Cape Horn. We're going to go across Drake's Passage to the Antarctic Peninsula. And we get on board and everybody's keen to get going, and the captain says, right, we're off. And suddenly lots of sick bags appear all around the ship. And everything from being compulsory became optional. And we had just a really interesting chat from the doctor on board, who said, you may well be sick. It is going to be rough. There is a big storm coming through and we need to get moving soon. Please take your medication. I hadn't got any medication, so I went to see the doctor and asked for some, because it started to get a bit rough. And we had 6 to 8 meter waves, which are enormous. That's higher than the ceiling of the school hall. And it just lasted for a mere 24 hours. So a whole day of up and down, up and down. And people were not very well at all. But we made it through. And it was a bit of an adventure. But during the night, as I tried to walk through a door, I got thrown across the room and the door slammed onto my finger. And there's my finger looking a little bit worse for wear the following day. But we made it across to the most beautiful place in the world. And there I am. There's me standing with our banner, School Energy Efficiency, with Robert Swan on the Antarctic continent. And while we were there, we made a pledge. what are we doing? We're going to need to do something to make a difference to what's going on in the world. We need to limit the amount of chemicals and greenhouse gases that we're putting up into the atmosphere. So our pledge was to, when I came back, I would share Rob's story with you. And that's the important bit. We need to start making those changes to reduce the amount of carbon dioxide we're putting up into that atmosphere. So I'm asking you directly, will you help me to help Rob, to help our world make the changes we need to make? In other words, to reduce the carbon dioxide we're putting up into the atmosphere and use more clean, renewable energy from solar panels and wind turbines, all those sorts of things. So that's my challenge and my ask from you. So my finger, when I came back, people would come around to me and go, oh, what happened to your finger? I'd be like, well, when I was in Antarctica, they were like, did you get frostbite? And it was like everybody wanted me to get frostbite. And I was like, no, trapped it in the door, which was a little bit disappointing in terms of the story. But after 1 month, it looked like that. After 2 months, it looked like this. And after 3 months, it still looked like that. But I was a reminder all the time that I needed to do something to make sure that I was paying back and making a difference. And that's why I'm talking to you right now. So wherever I went around the country, there it was, my gammy finger. So even at the rugby, what are you going to do? What can we do when we say we want to make changes? We want to make changes that are going to make a difference. I'm going to come back to the story in a minute. Richard's going to tell you about what you can do.
Wow, what an amazing story. And it's not finished yet. So I'm going to talk about the stuff that you can do, because you may be looking at that story and think, wow, things like that won't happen to me. But it happens to him. And if it can happen to him, then it can happen to anyone. He really wasn't expecting to be in Antarctica 3 weeks after just chatting to someone in a meeting. So these things just happen, and it's whether you grab these opportunities yourself. And we can all make a difference. So we've just got some ideas about what you can do in your school. So here you go, just a group of guys here in a school, and they're going around checking classrooms to see if they've finished class for the day or for the break or lunchtime. Have they switched off the lights? Yeah. And if they have, they get one of those. You can see what they are. They're just milk bottle tops, aren't they? So they get one of those. And when they add them up at the end of the week, the class with the most bottle tops actually wins the sustainability prize that every class wants to win at the end of the week. So what else can you do? You can switch off computers. So if your class teacher is left on their computer or left on the whiteboard screen or anything else in the room and they're not using it, just switch it off. Ask them if you can switch them off if they're so busy, because they're busy people. Maybe you've got a green club or an eco club or an eco warriors, whatever you're called. Have you got one? If not, start one up. Maybe look up Eco Schools, which is the world's biggest sustainability schools program. It's a great framework with lots of things going on. And it's always a good idea to have an eco award. So have something that your class can win at the end of the week. And so there's a lovely penguin one there, heavily loved by the looks of it. But maybe that's something that you can aim to win as many times as you can in the school year. So what else can you do? You can work with your site manager and with your school teachers and maybe change the heating timing so it doesn't come on too early or keeps going on late in the day, because you can save loads of energy. I tell you, that is the truth. You can save so much energy, money and carbon going into the atmosphere. Now, have you been warm in your classroom? Could you do with that thermostat being turned down? Well, if you could do with that, then tell somebody, tell your teacher, tell the site manager, tell one of the leadership team, maybe even your head teacher. And actually, look, they've got a little thermometer in this picture down there. You can stick in your classrooms. You can get them online really cheap, and you can put it in. And you can point to it and say, look, it's really hot in here. It's over 21, when really it should be more like 18, 19 degrees, something like that, so that you work at your best. So if you actually use temperatures, thermometers like that, you actually have information to share and then can take action to change it. And you can do things like this. So in your school, do you have a foundation? Probably do. Now, are their doors always open so they can go and play outside and come in and go to the loo and that sort of thing? Probably. Now, if you put down, you can see the plastic slats there, can't you? Now that actually comes across like butcher's curtains and stops the heat coming out and stops the cold getting in. Simple thing that you can put on hooks during the heating season and then take them off when you no longer need the heating on. Great idea, saves loads of money and carbon. Simple idea. So very quickly, what else can your school do? Maybe you can join up with Ashton, who we work with a lot. We're mentors for their Less CO2 Schools program, which is all about helping the adults in your school to actually, it's like train the trainer. It's like helping your staff understand about how they can help you to actually be better at sustainability and to save energy. There's also things like Energy Sparks, who use information from your electricity and gas meters. There's these things called smart meters that have lots of data that comes out, and they just put it together in really simple diagrams like this on this image, where you can work out, oh, that's not right. You're using far too much there at night. Why is that happening? And then you take action. You work out that something's gone wrong. Maybe people are leaving on all the laptop trolleys. Maybe the heating's coming on because it's set wrong. Simple things can save loads of energy and carbon. So have a think about that. And solar for schools. I mean, we see renewable energy everywhere. We see wind turbines around the countryside, out to sea, and we see solar panels. Now think of all the 30,000 schools around our country. Imagine if they all had solar panels on. They'd be producing an enormous amount of electricity that your school can use, that your community can use, and the country can use. So why wouldn't you do it? Why wouldn't you cover your school in solar panels? And you can watch how much energy you're actually generating and actually using. It's great. And you don't even have to pay for them, because these people like Solar for Schools will pay for them, and you can buy their electricity cheaper off them. So it really works. It's a sensible idea. And then there's this lovely schools campaign. It's called Let's Go Zero 2030. So what we're doing is we're looking for schools to sign up, because at the moment, it's 2021, the summer, and in a few months' time, there's a big conference in Glasgow where all the people around the country, all the governments are sending important people to work out what are we going to do about the targets we set in Paris a few years ago. It's actually all about the actual actions we're going to take. And this campaign is all about you schools and you students having a voice at that conference to actually say, we want you to do as many actions as you can to make the biggest change you can do, because it's our future you're dealing with here. Yeah, we're going to be around till 2100 is what you'll be saying. So we're going to say all the big changes, and the things you do now and the things you promise and turn into actual actions will make the biggest difference to not only your lives, but to everyone around the world. So it's a big thing. So if you join with the thousands of schools, you can make that big change and let them hear your voice.
So, are you lucky? I was lucky. I was lucky to get that opportunity, but it wasn't easy. It was tricky. I really had to work hard to make it happen once I'd met Rob. And I tend to think about Rob. Was he lucky? You could think, yeah, he was very lucky, because if the wind hadn't changed directions, he might not have survived. You know, there were occasions where he made decisions, you know, that made a huge difference. And he was a little bit lucky, but he seized those opportunities. He didn't stumble across being the first man to walk to the North and South Poles. That doesn't just happen to you by accident. He made it happen. He saw something that he wanted to do and he went out and made it happen. And that's where we've all learned something. If we can take something from today, is there are opportunities for us to go out and make a difference to our environment, what we're doing at home, what we're doing in our school, and that will make a difference to what's happening globally, okay? And that's really important. So sometimes we need to make our own luck. So luckily, yes, the fingernail fell off. And look, my fingers all work. It's all right. But yeah, it was a bit messy. But I was very lucky, because if you look at the date on the board there, it says my IC Classroom 2015. So I originally went in 2014, and I was lucky enough to go back in 2015 and 2016. And there's my IC Classroom for the day. Pretty good, hey? So there I am, working with people from all over the world. And then look, the penguins came in and photobombed me. So look at the one on the right-hand side, just saying to the one in the middle lying down saying, hey, dude, come and get in the photo, and so there they are attacking my bag and just coming to say hello. These are lovely little Gen 2 penguins.
Is it true they really smell?
Oh, they do.
Oh, okay.
I mean, they look great, but they do stink. Much better to look at them on now. So taking opportunities and creating change. That's what we're about. There's an opportunity now to get on board, get involved with Let's Go Zero, get involved with Less CO2. Let's make some changes in your school. Let's make the changes that we need to help us, to help Rob, to help make those changes. And that's the really important thing, I think, is taking a positive stance and creating the change. We can do this. We just all need to be involved. So if you can need any help, we're here to try and help you out too. So that's my story. I hope you enjoyed it. So please take care, do your little thing, and let's keep moving forward with this. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.